Welcome all to episode 1 of The Blank Chat. If you're a lover of music composition, especially scores for film, TV, and gaming, you've come to the right place. I'm Charles Steinberg, a music journalist with a fondness for wordless music, really just a big score geek. I'm a contributor to The Blank Mag, and now genuinely thrilled to be bringing you The Blank Chat, where on each new episode, we'll fill in the blank with a different character central in the production of music for the moving image. No doubt many of these names will belong to composers, but the seat is open to all manner of artists. The skilled technicians and musicians who bring the compositions to life, music supervisors who source the recorded songs that shape the telling of a story. Really all admirers of this form and purpose of music who want to share their unique perspectives. Our first very welcome guest is Hrishikesh Hirway, known to many through his brilliant and essential Song Exploder podcast, where he has translated a deep curiosity with the artist's process into a show that, unlike any other published attempt at the same, opens portals into musical creativity. For more than a decade, and across hundreds of shows, Hirway has delivered to the avid music fan intimate accounts from their favorite artists, as they conjure memories of a song and its conception. It wouldn't be surprising if those tuning in here were listeners of Song Exploder as well, and knew already that Hirway was not only a great podcaster, but a composer of score too. I myself was unaware of this until I saw this year's sneakily successful mixed-genre romp Companion, and found to my surprise his name under the music byline. A recording artist in his own right, Hirway had all but resigned to the likelihood that his long-time ambition to become a working film composer would fall short. Then, good friend and neighbor Drew Hancock announced out of nowhere that his script for Companion was being made into a film that he would also direct, and he wanted Hirway to score it. Embracing the opportunity to accompany Hancock on his debut project, Hirway rose to the challenge of scoring his first major feature and hurdled it. Companion is a very fun movie with a commanding soundtrack, and I think it's safe to say that a certain great podcaster's dream to compose for feature films is very much alive and kicking. This is the Hrishikesh Hirway Chat. I did want to say something that was important for me to share with you, which is that in your productions, both audio and visual, and I was watching some of the Song Exploder on Netflix too, your productions have brought me to tears a number of times, and I really take notice of that. It's like if I'm listening to or watching something and I'm tearing up, I'm like, all right, how is this being done that is eliciting this response from me? One occasion was definitely Julianne Baker talking about appointments.
Yeah.
She said something like, no matter how small the pinhole of light is, it's entirely possible that within the next day or week or month, we can feel something closer to joy. Mm-hmm. That kills me.
Yeah.
And the way she delivered it as well, the way she said it, it just, I don't know, that really hit me very hard.
Well, I can't take credit for what she said.
Right. But I feel like you can take credit for something that I wanted to ask you about, which is kind of, it feels like you get people into a zone where they're giving a lot of careful thought and reflective wisdom to their answers. And this is something that was confirmed when I was watching the Trent Reznor episode on Hurt, where in the very beginning of it's just very clear that he's open to you. He's considering you, the question, the song, everything. And I know that's the forum for it. And so there's a level of that has to be expected and you have to rise to as somebody being interviewed. But you seem to have a way of being disarming with your guests. And I was wondering about that. And what do you attribute that to? It's just practice at becoming a good interviewer? Is that really what it comes down to?
I think a big part of this is creating the right context. You know, it's not actually something that I'm doing in the moment, and more just about setting the scene for it, you know, kind of saying like, here's this place where I want to talk about everything that you were going through when you created this, what inspired it, what were your obstacles, both technical and mental, and, what were the things happening in your life that you think, where you can hear the DNA of who you were at the time in the creative decisions that you made. I think that's just sort of that's the context for what the show is and the concept before you even start the conversation. And I think that does so much work because it's not the kind of conversation that a lot of musicians get to have. I don't think there are a lot of outlets for something like that. And maybe you get to have those kinds of conversations with some of your closest friends or the people that you're on tour with or something like that. But I know from personal experience, just how much can go into a song, how much work and care can go into it. And a lot of times that stuff is just kind of left in the room, or left in your own head. So I think just providing a space for people to say some of those things helps a lot, because then people are excited to be thoughtful about it, excited to delve into those ideas, because it's not something where they feel like, well, I'm just talking about the same talking points that I've talked about in 6 other interviews or something like that. And then I think probably part of creating that context and then what is happening in the actual moment, part of who I am is someone who created this show because of wanting it in my own life. I wanted it both as a listener, as an audience member, and I wanted it to exist so that maybe someday I could answer questions like that. I just wished for something like that, especially in the wake of, doing a lot of bad interviews or doing, kind of answering the same kinds of questions. I remember I was at South by Southwest a dozen years ago, maybe a year or two before I started Song Exploder, and trying to promote an album that I had coming out. And this was in the heyday of like a lot of blogs, and you'd get these like 5-minute interviews, with somebody from a blog while you're standing outside on the sidewalk outside of the venue of the show that you're about to play. And, just there isn't a lot of room for depth or reflection or something. And you're trying to talk about something that, for me at that point, it was something that I had spent years making. And so I think I just had a personal hunger for a situation where you could have the kinds of conversations that I wish I were having on either side of it, either as the interviewer or the interviewee. So when it comes to having the actual conversations with other artists, I hope that they feel that I'm somebody who's genuinely interested in these things and who can genuinely appreciate what they're talking about. Even if they make music that's very different from mine or their experiences are very different from mine, at some kind of fundamental level, I'm looking for the connective tissue between who they are and what they make, and how what they make is uniquely related to their experiences and their perspective and the way they see the world.
Are you surprised? Because it surprises me when I hear these episodes, especially artists speaking about maybe a song that they made years ago, the recall that they have. Does it surprise you that somebody can kind of put themselves back when they made this song, how they were feeling on the day or the day before or leading up to it on their way to the studio or whatever it was, and they're able to know kind of the decisions and remember the decisions that were made in terms of what kind of drum or what kind of bass line we're going to use here? Is that it surprises me that the artists have that level of recall, or is it something where they kind of know that this is coming, and so they maybe give it some thought before jumping on with you?
Well, I definitely appreciate the times when artists come and I'll ask them a question and they'll be like, I knew this was going to come. And so I've written down, here are my notes. Okay, it was this thing, or they'll talk to somebody else. They'll be like, I had a conversation with the producer to refresh my memory about this stuff. But there was recently a moment where I interviewed Graham Nash from Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young.
I remember that one.
Yeah. And I was so shocked. It's actually in the episode because I'm like, how are you able to remember this stuff? Because his level of detail is just incredible. He's talking about, at that time, he was talking about memories that are over 50 years old. And he had incredible detail. That was one where I was so surprised, and it just felt so surprising that I felt like it had to be included in the episode because I thought everybody was going to be thinking the same thing, and they needed to hear me say it, and they needed me to articulate what everybody was going to be feeling, which is like, how do you remember this stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And that's one of the most fun things about it, because what this podcast does is really does transport you. It feels like you're transported to a day in the life of an artist. And that to me is gold,
Yeah. I will also say that I think one of the tricks of getting those specific memories is the format of the show. Again, like kind of just like place setting, table setting, with what the show is, because our memories are triggered by sensory experiences. And, maybe you've heard a song that you've made many, many times in the years that you've made it, but it's a different thing to hear an isolated stem that you might have recorded and maybe never listened to again once you finished the song or finished recording it that day. And hearing something like that, I think can have a kind of triggering effect where it transports you back and suddenly you're in that space and your memory is sparked in a way that just talking about it conversationally might never bring up.
You once said in an interview that as somebody who's trying to make creative work, you're looking for ways to learn from these artists that you interview and apply lessons to the way that you think about things. Mm-hmm. Can you recall concrete things that you've taken away from somebody talking about their process that you've then applied to your work and maybe even in scoring?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly inspired by things that people have said in the podcast. And there are so many times when I've sort of cribbed a technique or something like that, whether it's in a song of mine or in some other, piece of composition or production or something like that. And I've interviewed a fair number of composers for the podcast over the years. Harry Gregson Williams and Hans Zimmer and Johann Johansson.
Oh, yeah, I remember the Hans Zimmer one.
Yeah.
And then you did one for the Daily theme music.
I did. Yep. And Dustin O'Halloran and Nicholas Bertel, who you mentioned. A lot of my favorite composers have been on the show, and I would say one of the things that I've been most inspired by, sort of at a general level, is my favorite moments from those conversations have been when composers have really been able to weave parts of the narrative of whatever they're composing into their music in a really palpable or like profound way. And then I get to hear about it. Like, that has been so cool. I remember Ramin Djawadi did an episode on the theme to Game of Thrones. And he talked about how it shifts from a major key to a minor key and major key to minor key because people's allegiances within the different houses change to one another. And it's very hard to predict which side someone is going to be on at any point. And I thought that's such a brilliant reason. The music is already good. Like, that's sort of the prerequisite. The music has to be good. But then to have an underpinning that is so derived from the story of the show, I just thought that was such an incredible way of taking inspiration and catalyzing it into something beautiful.
Yeah, I know examples of what you're talking about, and I can't think of them right now, but I know when somebody's talking about, oh, that's where that idea comes from. And it's illustrated in this little part. I mean, something very obvious, speaking of Hans Zimmer, is the ticking of the clock tempo through Dunkirk. I mean, that's something that is, it's very overt almost, you know, using that as using the reference of the passage of time throughout that film. Is there something that is there a similar thing for Companion, let's say, that you might have done? Can you talk about?
So that's why I think, I think in both my songs and in my composition, basically, I'm trying to respond to the things that are my favorite things when I interview other artists. One example that is in the score throughout the whole movie is there are a lot of my vocals that have been pitch shifted as a source. Mostly texturally, but sometimes melodically or rhythmically, because there's this, you know, moment in the plot where Iris changes the sound of her voice. And so clever, I thought, oh, I want that to be something, even if nobody ever notices it or something. It was just a guiding principle for me, that when I'd be like, oh, what element do I want here? Oh, I know, I'll use my voice and I'm going to pitch it up a fifth or an octave or something. And so I'd build these little mini choirs of my voices. They don't sound like me, and they don't really even sound totally human, because they have that kind of like uncanny valley aspect of like being crazy pitch shifted. But that's one example where I was like, I'm doing this because of what the movie is about. My voice kind of happens in a few different places. One is this like pad of just like these ahs that I'm doing, where I kind of put them on the keyboard, and I'm playing chords with them. But then there's also a couple of moments where there's like a ha 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 ha, and that's my voice as well. And then the third place where my voice is in there is in the Iris theme. You know, Sophie Thatcher, who plays Iris, sings the main melody that I wrote. But in addition to her voice, and again, you might not know it when you're listening to it, but if you know it and then you listen to it, I think you can hear it. There's a blend of her vocal with my vocal. It's 90% her voice, but there's 10% of my voice pitch shifted and I sort of jammed my voice through a very, very gnarly pitch shifter to make it sound, it's literally a setting. There's a setting called Robot in a pitch shifting plugin that actually makes your voice monotone. So I sang the melody, but then I ran it through this thing, and so it gets rid of all of the melodic information and makes your voice sound like this. And then I reintroduced the melodic information by like manually pitch shifting the notes in Pro Tools. And so I reintroduced the melody. So it's really kind of very, very, very artificial, but it's sitting underneath her actual natural singing voice. And so you get this like this feeling of like, oh, this is just a woman singing beautifully. But if you're listening closely, there's also this slightly unreal artificial synthetic element happening just below the surface as well.
Oh man. And you know, without asking that question, I would never have known that. And now it makes me think and listen to that piece differently. And that's the kind of thing I love. It makes me think about something else that Trent Reznor said. And by the way, I think there should be a drinking game for me in podcasts every time I bring up Trent Reznor, because I've done a number of score related podcasts, and I think probably in every episode I bring him up at least once.
Yeah, that's fair.
But something that he said, he was speaking specifically about score music, I believe, where he's adding things that you almost can't even audibly pick out, but they're somehow disturbing. And it creates an unnerving, unsettling feel to something, even though it's not something that you can really put your finger on. And I guess that kind of feels like one of those examples. Yeah.
And feel free to move on to your other question. Otherwise I can give you more examples of this.
Yeah, please. No, I'm happy to hear them. Yeah.
One thing that I really, I really liked doing. And again, I don't know if anybody will ever catch this. I can't imagine that someone will, but there's a little sound that happens in the movie whenever you hear one of the characters say "Love link is established." It's this little alert sound.
Yeah.
And it's just it's like a sort of computer alert kind of sound. I actually made that sound. It's not a piece of sound design. It's technically a piece of score, and it's a little chord. It's just a chord that plays. And let me see if I can actually play it for you over here. Let me see. Love link. Yeah, here we go.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So it's just this little chord that plays, but if you were to break that chord up into an arpeggio, you would get this. It's the first four. Wow. It's the first four notes of Iris's theme. And so in my head, the way that this goes is that, that is the sound of love, right? That is literally, she says that love link has been established. And so her love theme has been playing in her head. And she, like somewhere in this unconscious ghost in the shell kind of dreaming, waking consciousness that she has, that sound has been converted into this melody that she's humming to herself all the time, because those are the notes that she hears.
And you could just so completely go right past that thing, because that sounds like a kind of generic
alert sound.
Yeah. So you could roll right past that without ever knowing that is the case and that connection is there.
Yeah.
And this is why I love having these conversations to learn about these things. But speaking of things like little treasures or Easter eggs that are in movies that maybe the director and the actors and the makers of the movie know about, but that's about it. When I first heard Iris's theme, it was familiar to me, but I didn't know why. I was like, it's like either something that speaks to me of European cinema.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that immediate, when I say that immediately rings true to you.
I mean, that's what exactly what we were going for is, like we wanted it to feel like something that felt like a classic piece of European cinema that you were like remembering. We were listening to 60s Italian soundtracks and things like that. And and so I was like, oh, it's going to have to be on classical guitar and things like that. And even the chord progression, just trying to evoke that kind of feeling. That was exactly the conversation that Drew and I had. So I started writing music for this before they shot anything, because having not had the experience of doing a studio movie before, I kind of had to audition for the movie. Even though Drew wanted to work with me, the producers and the studio, they weren't familiar with me to say like, okay, sure, no problem. So in order to get the job, I wrote some music based on the script that Drew had written, and with some direction from him. And that initial music is way more sci-fi. It's like, it was sort of synthy and had a really different feeling to it. And it wasn't just my sort of take on it. It was based on, like I said, what I was talking about with Drew. And then they came back. So their filming got interrupted by the actors strike. So they shot 3 weeks of it. They came back and Drew showed me the footage and he was like, I was completely wrong. This is not a sci-fi movie. I mean, it is not going to feel like that. It should feel timeless. And look at what Sophie Thatcher's, portrayal of Iris looks like. And he showed me this footage and I was like, oh, she kind of reminds me. She has like a Godard kind of like French New Wave thing kind of going on, or like she belongs in an Antonioni movie or something, like
even the wardrobe.
Exactly. Even, yeah. Her wardrobe, her hair, her makeup, everything was this very different kind of timeless vibe. And Drew had said, one thing he had said, from the beginning was, this is a movie that is a relationship drama at its heart. And he's like, so one of the challenges that you're going to have to do is figure out how to bring the kind of romance. And very sweetly, he had said to me, he's like, the reason why I'm coming to you to do the music is because, like, he's like, I know there's going to be action cues and things like that we're going to have to do. But the most important thing to me is making sure that we have like a real aching romantic sensibility. And that is something I know you can do because I hear it all the time in your music. And that's going to be the thing. He's like, the other stuff I'm less worried about. If for some reason you can't do it, we'll get somebody else to do those parts or something like that. He's like, but this is the most important part. And so I want to have this in place. So he already knew that part. And then he showed me this and I was like, okay, so this is our way into this romance is not a modern thing, but like if I'm writing Iris's theme and this is what Iris looks like, then let me make the music feel like that. So it all goes together. But that was completely inspired by Sophie Thatcher's work. And I think she really had a huge hand in how her character was dressed. So I think, it was something that I did not have a conversation with them directly about it when I started working on the music, but Sophie Thatcher and the costume designer, Vanessa, they really, I think, played a big role in shaping what that theme sounded like.
I did listen to which I love this new direction, key change that you're going in, the new podcast direction for Song Exploder. Yeah. And I was listening to that and noticed the reference as well of Rosemary's Baby, the similarity in the sound and the mood of Iris's theme to the theme of Rosemary's Baby. Was that incidental, or was that another one of those things where maybe Drew was like a big fan of Rosemary's Baby and said, you know what, I kind of want something that maybe is in there that points to this, but not obviously? Or was that just incidental that similarity came about?
No, I mean, like we talked about because we were talking about films from that era, Rosemary's Baby came up, Polanski came up, Chinatown came up. Mm-hmm. Drew said he wanted to have specific themes for the character of Iris and for the character of Josh. And if possible, a love theme between Eli and Patrick. He did not say something like, hey, I would love it to have vocals, or hey, I would love it to be reminiscent of these kind of other scores or anything like that. One of the things that I brought up was the Ray Conniff singers, this sort of like, easy listening, big band, kind of orchestral, romantic, almost like schmaltzy kind of in its romance. And, these were also from like the 60s and 70s. And so we were listening to all of those things. The main thing of putting vocals in there was something where I was like, oh, I think to get this character's wistfulness and longing, it would be so nice if this melody were actually sung, as opposed to just being played instrumentally. But originally it wasn't going to be Sophie singing it. And then Drew told me that Sophie was a singer. And then I thought, oh my gosh, the way, like, part of the reason I think that Rosemary's Baby's theme is so amazing is not just because of the music, but because it's Mia Farrow singing it.
Which I didn't know. Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Mia Farrow. Those vocals are so weird, and like kind of out of tune. And totally. The whole thing has like a kind of nightmarish quality to it. And I think that again, in a way where it's like, how do you make the music be as filled with the story as possible? Well, one great way to do that is if you have a theme for a character, is to have the character in the theme.
Yeah.
And so thinking about that, I was like, well, can we put Iris's voice, or a voice that's supposed to be Iris, in Iris's theme? And then it turned out Sophie could do it for herself, and I was just like, that's perfect. That's like Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah. That's amazing. And then you're sneaking in there too, on the underpinning.
Yeah, exactly.
The robotic underpinning. What was it like to work? I mean, you had known Drew before this, I take it, right?
I've known him for decades.
Decades. Okay.
Yeah.
So was your relationship always a friendship until recently?
So Drew's best friend from elementary school is one of my closest friends, who I met in high school. And so we met through him. And whenever he would come to visit LA, we would all hang out. And then Drew and I ended up living on the same block for many, many, many years. And so even when our mutual friend wasn't in town, we'd just go for a walk or, catch up, hang out. We would go to see movies sometimes. I remember Drew and I went to go see Predators together. And we've just kind of been socially buddies for a long time. And at one point, we were trying to figure out if maybe Drew could direct a music video for one of my songs. And that didn't end up working out, but I used to go see his comedy videos that he would do for Channel 101. And I remember watching the MTV Music Awards or the MTV Video Awards. There was an awards show where Jack Black was the host and Drew had written the jokes. And Drew actually was on stage with Jack Black. I remember watching those. It was 2007 or something, and watching that and being like, "There's my friend Drew,"
Yeah.
So we've been friends and kind of, I think, mutual fans for a long time. And I don't know that I ever anticipated that we would ever get the chance to work together. I didn't know that he was going to get. I knew that he was writing. He had been writing a lot of TV. I didn't know even that I found out that he got this script greenlit by seeing it in the trades. And I texted him and I was like, this is so exciting. I didn't even see in the thing that he was also going to direct it.
It wasn't planned that way immediately, right? Wasn't it going to be the director of Barbarian?
Yes, originally it was supposed to be that Zach Kreger was going to direct it, and
right,
based on Drew's script, and that was going to be great. And but then Barbarian, as soon as Barbarian opened and had this monster opening weekend, Drew was like, "It's not going to happen. He's not going to direct this." And then, sure enough, he's like, "Hey, you know what? I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be able to direct this, but I think you should direct it. You have a vision for it, and look, I will help make it happen. I will produce it." And he stayed true to his word. And thank God he did for me, because I only got this opportunity because Drew got to direct for the first time.
That's incredible. So you're kind of both on the same trajectory in a way, side by side throughout this whole movie making process. I mean, he's a first time director. I know you're not a first time composer for film, but it had been a long time.
And I hadn't done anything on this scale before.
On this scale.
Yeah.
So did that rear its head in some way? Did that present challenges that were unusual, like you both kind of being on this same parallel in your first major work like this? I mean, what was that like?
I don't think it presented challenges that were so wild for anybody who's had to do this. I think one of the reasons why Drew asked me to do it, he told me this explicitly because originally when he said, let's talk about the score, let's talk about the music for the movie, we went on this walk together. We went on a hike in our neighborhood because we still live in the same neighborhood. And it was 3 days after I'd read the script, and I was just like, this is so great. This is February of 2023. And I was like, have you thought about this composer? I know you're a fan of this composer. Have you thought about them? And have you thought about this? And what about this person? This person would be great. And he basically stopped me and he was like, so do you not want to score this yourself? And I was like, and I was like, I mean, yeah, but I don't want to, let you down. This is a huge opportunity, and you could work with huge people. And he was like, as a first-time director working with somebody who's huge, that I'm a huge fan of, I might not feel comfortable saying to them, this is wrong, or look, I don't know exactly what I want here, but I need to figure it out with you. Can we figure it out in conversation? He's like, but with you, I know that I can come over and we can talk about it for an hour, and I can sort through my ideas, and I'm not going to be intimidated by you. And I think that my chance of getting what I actually want is higher by being able to like have a relationship with someone professionally that I have a relationship with at a friend level. And so, yeah, I was really the lucky recipient of all of those years of friendship because I was somebody that he felt like he could do that. So we did have challenges where there were moments where he would say like, okay, here's the scene. I don't know what this scene needs. I know that it's supposed to be, it can't be this. I have this objective. We have to get here by the end of it, but I don't know what that translates to musically. He's like, I don't know enough about music to say, this is what the thing is, and this is how you get there, so execute this. He's like, so all I can say is like, try something, and and I'll let you know. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And so we were both kind of feeling our way towards some of these solutions. So that was a kind of a challenge in that like we didn't necessarily have the shorthand of immediately being like, oh, it's this kind of scene, so we're going to do A, B, C, and D, and then we'll get to E. We were kind of like, well, we know we want to get to E. What are the ingredients? And we would figure it out together. And so maybe it took longer than it might take somebody else. It might have taken him longer to articulate it, and it might have taken me longer to capture it. But it didn't feel so much like a challenge as it was just what we needed to do to find our way there.
Yeah, that language and communication that I feel a composer and a director are always trying to get closer to ease along the creative process is something that maybe was already established before you guys even worked together. So
yeah.
that's pretty cool. I want to leave you with this just because it occurred to me in learning about you and learning about your music and everything else. I realized that you are in a position of always having to actively listen all the time, whether it be music, evaluating and listening back to your own music, listening to other people's music, listening to people talk, listening to transcripts or, whatever it is of podcasts that you're like, I'm now just in editing mode. You're actively listening all the time. Do you feel like because of all the active listening, you need to find a balance where there's nothing and you can kind of just sit with emptiness and space and kind of recalibrate or reprogram that way, your own kind of reprogramming?
I have two answers for this. One, for sure, there are times where I've had headphones on for, 8 hours and I have to step away and just go for a walk and not look at my phone and not listen to something, not engage with any kind of audio information, just to give my brain a reset and to give my ears a reset. Like that's almost biological. I think there's another way of, another part of this question that I think was in your question, implicitly, if not explicitly. And this gives us a chance to end on your favorite subject, which is Trent Reznor.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned, that I heard articulated by him and I think about all the time, something that he said in his Song Exploder episode on the podcast. He talked about kind of the difference, like the sort of the roles that he has with Atticus Ross, and that there's a moment where they're in just pure creation, absolutely like just throwing ideas out. And he said, and then I step away and I'll let Atticus sort of edit what we've worked on. And he's like, but he separates those moments, the moments of listening to something. And I'm going to relate this to listening because I think listening is a big part of creating. And for me, one of the things that's really important is listening to the stuff that I make in a way that's different from the way that I listen to other people's music for the podcast, or the way I listen to when I'm listening as an editor versus when I'm listening as a creator. I have to separate those two different ways of listening. One of them is very critical and very judgmental, not necessarily like pejoratively judgmental in a way where I'm like, oh, this is good and this is bad, but more like, does this work? Does this make sense? Is the timing here correct? Do I need an extra second before they start the next sentence or whatever? That kind of production way of listening is one thing. And part of the reason why I hadn't made music for so long is because it was impossible for me to listen to my own music in a non-judgmental way. I would start listening and I'd immediately apply the critic's ear to it, and it would prevent me from making anything because I couldn't recognize that these were two separate processes. And what Trent Reznor said is he said, there's plenty of time later to hit it with the "it sucks" hammer. And that's the thing that I keep in my head is that, there are different ways of listening, and they aren't interchangeable. And there are times when you need to actively forget listening like that. And so it's slightly different from what you're saying about active listening, and more about just sort of like generous listening versus critical listening or something.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I do. And I think the physical, biological part of taking off your headphones and just not listening to anything plays into both sides of that.